Hello, Dominic M Wright here, and today I'm extremely excited to be sharing with you an overview of my entry to the Spitfire Westworld Scoring Competition. So here we are in Cubase. I'm on version 9.5 on Windows 10. I have reduced the resolution, so hopefully if you're on a smaller device you'll be able to see a little bit better. Unfortunately, I can't show you the video clip because we weren't given permission for that with the competition. We were only allowed to use it for the competition. So what I've done is I've left this time display down here, which will line up with either of my YouTube videos in the description. One of them is the entry I've put in for the competition. The other one is exactly the same, just without the dialogue and effects. So, but for this video, I can only play you my music. I can't play you the video or the dialogue and effects. So if you want to see it in context, I would recommend going and watching the actual entry. And it also is probably a good idea to follow along and use this time display so you see how things fit together. Before we get into it, I just thought it might be a good idea to go over the judging criteria, because they are actually quite well hidden within the terms and conditions. There's 4 of them, and the first one is enhancement of the viewing experience. The second is creative inventiveness. The third is adding emotion, and the last one is adding storytelling to the clip. And they've also said that if there were to be a tie, the deciding tie-breaking factor would be creative inventiveness, which I thought was quite interesting, because they're obviously looking for new and interesting things, not the typical, ostinato strings and big percussion and blaring brass. So I just my sort of general approach to it was, well, it's quite a busy clip. There's an awful lot going on. It's only a 4 and a bit minute clip, but it feels much longer because the cuts are so fast. And so I did actually go through and put a marker on each cut, and I went through it frame by frame to do that, which in hindsight was a waste of time. But it did actually help me to see where the really busy bits were versus the bits that had a bit more breathing room in them. So that was the first thing, that it's an incredibly busy clip. So I didn't want the music to be so busy, because it's really easy to overwrite and overclutter the frequencies, and it just, because the clip is so busy, it needs its own space. So really, I wanted the music to be quite, more scaled back than I would usually do. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I thought it's quite important to keep out of the vocal range. There's not much in the way of dialogue in it, but there are bits in it, and some of the bits are fairly important. So I really tried to keep out to that kind of 1 to 6K range when there's dialogue, and in some places I cheated and used a multi-band compressor, but that was something that was definitely the forefront of my mind, is I've got to fit around the dialogue. And the third kind of thing that I was really conscious of is that I wanted the music to respond to the picture. In the clip that in the version they used for the original, the Wagner, to me it looks as if they edited to the music, because things do line up. Obviously Wagner didn't write that for that, because it's he's long gone, isn't he? But they fit together well, and I don't think that was a coincidence. I think that was cut to it. Obviously we can't alter any of the cuts, but what I wanted to avoid was just writing a 4-minute piece of music that happens to be playing at the same time. And there's quite a few changes of mood and changes of sort of pace in here, and I think the music needs to reflect that. And they can, both the music and the film want to kind of coexist in a sort of symbiotic relationship. They don't want to fight with each other. They're both. The music wants to be better with the film, and the film wants to be better with the music. It's a two-way relationship, and that's important. That's important. Lastly, and this kind of I wasn't thinking about this, but it was quite difficult. Is that because I think Spitfire are after something that is new and innovative and creative and inventive, but also we are so conditioned to expect, you know, low ostinato strings with a synthesizer bubbling away underneath. It's really hard to do something that is new and inventive and creative, but also actually meets the kind of audience expectation, actually works. Because you can do something that's out there and it might work, but it's going to be like there's going to be more luck that it works, because it's incredibly difficult because we're so conditioned to expect it. So it was quite difficult to get that right, and it was quite a fine line to walk between doing the generic, low spiccato cellos with a synth bubbling underneath, and then doing something so bonkers that it just doesn't work at all. So that also was something that I was thinking about. Just before we get into it, I thought it might be a good idea to go over the instrumentation. Most of the heavy lifting is done by the strings, and there are solo strings as well as a full ensemble. I am actually using Cinematic Studio strings, and I did actually have a nightmare that Christine Henson came through my ceiling because I hadn't used Spitfire stuff. It's actually quite scary. But these are the best strings I own. I don't own any of the BBCSO or the symphonic stuff. I'd love to, but this is the best I've got. You notice here, I have actually tweaked with the microphones. A lot of close, a little bit of main. That's because I wanted that really quite aggressive, quite dry, quite toothy sound. I didn't want a load of room ambience. So I tweaked that for all of the strings. And for brass, again, it's the Cinematic Studio, but brass this time, obviously. And again, I tweaked it. More main room this time, more main mic, sorry, because brass tends to lose quite a lot of its character if you just use the close mic. Percussion-wise, most of it is Drums of War 2 from Cine Samples, which I absolutely love, and most of it is taikos, daikos, etc. I picked those because they have quite a lot of the higher frequencies to kind of cut through a lot of the rumbly sound effects. And then I've got these swells, earthquake hits, low hits, which are from the that is Spitfire stuff. Hooray! The originals, that you get. I mean, I got it for free because I had original Albion, but I think it's 29 quid. Well worth it. And then miscellaneous. We have the choir, the labs, Spitfire labs, the Eric Whittaker. I would love the full version of this. I mean, the free version is phenomenal. The sound of it is amazing. It worked really, really well for this. And I'm a big Eric Whittaker fan as well. And then finally, I've got this reversed piano cluster chord. I can't remember which piano used to do this. It was one of the East-West. I think it's probably the Steinway East-West. Just a cluster chord with a big reverb on it, and then reverse sample, heavily compressed, EQ'd out some hiss and a little bit of auto pan just to give it a little bit of motion so it's not so static. So I think that's everything. This sketch piano here is just, this isn't in the track, it's just what I used to sketch out, and that's Alicia's keys. Right, so let's get on with it. Okay, so those first few bars from the opening to where the bullets first hit the car, really straightforward. It's just a solo, tremolo, cello, and a roll on the taikos, and there's just a little bit of a swell that just as his hand goes over the iPad. I started from a point, my starting point for that section was the kind of razor blade on the cello, the Dark Knight kind of sound, but that was too much for that, because this, to me, this section wasn't so much tense as apprehensive. Like, they don't know they're being chased yet. They maybe know that they're in danger. They know that there are people after them, but they don't know that they're so close. So I kind of wanted it to be more kind of apprehensive and a little bit nervous rather than properly tense. So that the next section from where the bullets hit the car to where the tyre spins. I know I just said that I didn't think spiccato strings were going to win. But it's all that I think they work there. No percussion at all. I didn't want the percussion because you add the percussion and it sounds too big. It wanted to be really close and in the car and kind of a little bit panicky, kind of, who's that? What's going on? You know. So that motif you just heard in the horns, the duh, 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 you'll hear that quite a lot through the piece. And that is, I guess you'd say, a leitmotif for whenever the car is swerving. Because some of the big swerves later on are really, really quite violent and quite intense. So I really wanted to focus on those, you know, kind of, and use a leitmotif to do that. And obviously the percussion comes in after the wheel spin as well. And there's that leitmotif again. So, you'll notice that's the first time we've had the taiko sticks. And the reason I brought them in when I brought them in was that was the first time that all of the bad guys were in the cars chasing them. So that was actually the start of the car chase proper. So the timing of that was deliberate. Big boom just as she looks up disapprovingly. Okay, so that whole section, very lightly scored. In fact, really the only thing going on, I mean, there's a few booms and stuff, but really the only thing going on is the Spitfire, the labs, the choir, the R. And I was going for something very ethereal and kind of almost angelic in a way. So they talk about him genre switching. So he doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know what's going on. So I wanted that section to be very, very removed from the rest of the car chase, kind of in his own little bubble, in his own little world. He's not present in the moment, and it's kind of a feeling of sort of being spaced out, you know, almost if he's high or something. I don't know. And I used only the higher voices because I wanted that heartbeat sound, which you won't be able to hear here, but because it's part of the HBO soundtrack. But I really wanted that to come through. And I also used a tiny little bit of a multi-band compressor just to let the little bit of dialogues about the genre switch are coming through. And you'll notice as well that bit's in 4/4, a more normal time signature than the 7/8. The reason we're in 7/8 most of the time is because I wanted it to feel like 4/4, but the first beat comes too soon. So you kind of go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You know, all the time. It almost feels like it's speeding up, even though it's not. So you you know what you see what I'm getting at. See, this is the 7/8. If you can hear that, constant driving. And there's a similar sort of swerving motif. And again. So you'll see here, if you look at the tempo track, that it ever so slightly slows down. I think it goes from 150 to 145. So you're not going to notice that, but I didn't want you to notice that. I just want you to feel that. And also, no percussion. Percussion drops out. And the two of those things combined kind of give a space, You know, you kind of an airiness, because before it's all very close and very intimate and you're stuck in the car. And now we've got this big, great overhead shot that I wanted the feeling of the space. So I don't know if you can hear, but I've tried to do a sort of dodgy heart rhythm there. And also the choir comes back. So I'm very deliberately evoking that earlier space out scene. And this comes back to the fourth judging criteria, which is about adding storytelling to the clip. You see, I kind of thought, wouldn't it be cool if he was some friendly, smiley farmhand that is genre switched into a killer robot? And this whole section, he's looking at the gun and he knows what that gun is. He knows, you know, he says, is that standard issue? No, it's not. He knows it's not standard issue. So I'm trying to tie in the fact that he knows how to handle a gun with the fact that he's genre switched, because maybe he didn't know how to handle a gun before he genre switched. So I thought that might be a little bit interesting of extra storytelling there. And it is slower than before. And I wanted it because this is in the car again, but I wanted to be slightly slower because this scene, Dolores has been extremely methodical. Ugh, get my words out. So I wanted it to be kind of a little bit sort of slower, more deliberate. She's being a deliberate, methodical killer robot. So we just had a 7/8 bar and a couple of beats just on that outside scene. Speed up again, glass flying off. You know, we've gone back to the car chase again, then back inside again. So that there, where we've got that, I think it's 3 octaves. It's cellos, first and second in octaves. It's 3 octaves. That, to me, was the most important, biggest swerve. So all those little da 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 up until now have been building to this. I kind of was thinking about E.T., where you have that huge theme that right at the end, and the only reason that works is because John Williams has sewn little bits of that theme all the way through, right up until there, and this is the swerve that I wanted to really, really highlight. Okay, so there, I was trying to... So when he fires the missile off, when he first fires it, there's a couple of seconds where we don't know whether it's going to hit the car and blow it up or not. So I kind of wanted to build in that anticipation and then the kind of disappointment when he misses it. And then there is a Brahm sound. No horns, it's tuba and bass trombone, flutter tongue. So that kind of... where you get and then you get the sort of riser, which is the Albion one, the Legacy, the riser, just as it sort of flies off, and we think that's it. We're not going to see that missile again, but we're wrong, aren't we? See, there it is again. Okay, that whole build-up from where the missile kind of hits its peak and then it's heading back down towards hit the car, I wanted that to be on the edge of your seat, kind of you know what's coming, but you almost don't want it to happen. Kind of, kind of clench, grinding your teeth, kind of uncomfortable. Um, I didn't want any percussion. It wants to almost a stopped moment in time, kind of where everybody's holding their breath, waiting for the big explosion. And so that's why I was trying to build the intensity in the sound by adding all, I think it's lots of harmonics. But it didn't want any of the driving percussive stuff. It just wanted to be a stopped, breathless moment in time as we wait. So you'll notice there's a whole bar, 2 bars, in fact, of complete silence, which start exactly as the car blows up. And I wanted that to highlight the impact of the explosion, and also give space after the explosion for his reaction. Because if you look at his reaction, it's almost shell shocked. It's kind of, shock and awe, and again, it's kind of what have I done, and surprise. And I was also kind of thinking a little bit about that genre switching thing. Is it kind of, he's maybe not entirely comfortable with who he's become because of the genre switch. So it's what have I done, and then those big horn and trombone chords. That to me was kind of like something you'd hear at the end of an action cue, where it's like da 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 da, and then it gets interrupted as we see that there's still a bad guy left. So this bit, again, this is 4/4, but I wanted it to sound like the 7/8 bit. So I wanted it to feel slightly off balance and a little bit chaotic and a little bit precarious. They don't know whether their plan that they've got with the bike is going to work. They don't know if they're going to get caught. They thought they were going to get rid of everyone with the self-guiding missile thing, but they didn't. It's a little bit precarious. There's that swerve motif again. So you hear the low tremolo strings here. I wanted this to tie back to the beginning and that feeling of, again, not tension, but apprehension, because they're just standing there waiting for the bad guys to come now. They're not chased. They're not being chased anymore. So that whole end scene was I found it really quite tricky, because they stop the car, they get out the car, they stand there, nothing's happening, and then in really not a great deal amount of time, it's like the climactic, everything's blowing up, the bike's there, it's bonkers. So it was quite hard to get the feeling of the apprehensiveness that we just talked about and then build it up quick enough for a big finish without it being jarring. So that's why I've gone for this kind of layered, bringing all these different tremolo strings at different times to increase the intensity of the sound. And it grows and it gets huge. And it is big by the time we get to the end, and you notice it's big, but you don't necessarily notice you're getting there, if you see what I mean. And that's why it's kind of very limited percussion, because I just wanted there to be 1 or 2 big but effective hits rather than, banging on the frying pan all the way through. And then we get, if we go back to it, we get that Brahms sound again. Again, no horns. Tuba and bass trombone, flutter tongue. And again, that was when on his expression in his face, the same as we had it before, where it's kind of highlighting his kind of, you know, what am I involved with kind of face. And that brings us to the end. It was a really interesting clip, actually. Really quite challenging, but really good to get your teeth into. And it's amazing that Spitfire and HBO have given us this opportunity. So I'm incredibly grateful. I hope you've liked my entry, and I'd love for you to leave your comments, see what you thought worked, what didn't work, how I could have done things better. That's all we've got time for in today's video. Let me know what you liked about it and what you thought I could improve upon. If you found this entertaining or informative, then please do consider subscribing, liking and hitting that bell button. I've got some great content coming up in the next weeks and months. I've really enjoyed listening to all the entries for this competition. It's been an incredibly high standard and I can't wait until they announce the winner.